extreme censorship of truth by fascist government and private partnerships is a death warrant for freedom. This is translated from an article by Gary D. Barnett of April 12, 2023. And he says, let's be clear, censorship is cowardice. It hides corruption. It's a school of torture. It teaches and accustoms us to the use of violence against an idea, to the subjugation of thought, to a foreign other, quote unquote. But the worst thing is that censorship destroys criticism, which is a basic component of culture. This is what Pablo Antonio Quadara said. First of all, let it be known that even this essay itself will be censored and algorithmically hidden from view by the multitude of government-paid employees and private tech companies whose mission in life is to ensure that the engineered state narratives are all that the humble class of the proletariat sees. I know this firsthand, as over the past few years finding my articles with a normal web search has become very difficult, he says. I fully understand that my humble website is not relevant to the big picture by any criteria, but if my work is censored, then most things of value in terms of actual truth are surely heavily censored as well. The state narrative has replaced the truth at almost every possible level due to the military artificial intelligence, algorithmic manipulation, media collusion, government measures of regulatory containment and control. And the most recent example of this appalling silence of speech is U.S. Senate Restrict Act S-686, which is ultimately far more dangerous than any government agent or bureaucracy will ever explain. The mainstream media information or any fascist technological entity working with the Senate, and it was written under the guise, once again, of protecting the supposedly weak and stupid public, quote unquote, from national security threats due to any release of information that could possibly fall into the hands of any so-called foreign enemy. And this is described by the real enemy of this country. And all its members of its executive arms, controlled media, and all of the corporations and communications companies that work with this totalitarian system. This utter censorship insanity targets all posts on the internet that reveal reality and truth and uses scapegoats to censor, uses TikTok as a scapegoat to censor, greatly limits speech and shut down all criticism and dissent, all the while claiming that there is a connection with China. This is simply the U.S. Patriot Act model used as a way to control every speech by controlling every online communication and report. And this is just the latest attempt by the structure to silence us. In other words, people who openly discuss issues through any form of discourse are seen by the controlling elite and its system as a direct threat to its power structure. And therefore, there's a censorship being waged by this administration, and not only here, but worldwide, actually, and its executive arms, its partners, against a liberty-minded segment of populations. And this is intended by the government's mechanism of social control and direct threat not only to all freedom of speech, but to all freedom of the individual, and therefore to all of societies. And the key actors in this effort to silence all speech that does not fit the state narrative are extensive, but the linchpin of this coup, and is the main control, the mass media, banking cartels, heads of big businesses, NGOs, major universities, educational systems, are all involved in leading efforts to control or eliminate speech. There's also many agencies that are heavily involved and deeply entrenched in control measures to suppress and destroy speech. Now, for every government agency that scans and monitors social media and other communication media, there are over 20 semi-private partners doing the same thing. And given this knowledge, it should be brutally obvious that this is a concerted and very broad effort to completely control all communications. It's not only in the US, it's in Europe as well, it's in China. Now, the first line of defense, and Russia, the first line of defense from most of the plebeian herd and the alternative media is that it is a direct violation of the US First Amendment of the Constitution. And that, of course, is true in theory, but falling for the fraud that is the Constitution is a trick, that any Constitution can in any way protect liberties ludicrous and will not solve this or any other gross government intrusion or abuse of the lives and liberties of individuals. It's a trap, and that fact should be blatantly obvious as seen as such unless failure is intended. And the assumption made here by those who have been duped all along is that this piece of parchment has anything to do with royalty. No government can grant natural rights, nor can they protect them. This can only be achieved by people themselves, the individuals. And to rely on the very government that suspends and eliminates the right to this, which is perpetually bent on totalitarian behavior and the elimination of rights, to correct and reform is ridiculous on its face. So if the government cannot grant rights, why petition it to do so? Because if the government has the power to grant rights, it has the unlimited power to take away those rights at will. Any dependence on papers issued by the ruling class will never satisfy liberty. In fact, it can only be used to destroy it, as all courts and all houses of the so-called justice are owned, controlled solely of the government, and they are not private or dependent. They are the enemy of the people. They could be the enemy of the people, just as all government is forever the enemy of the people. An example is Stanford University's program called Virality Project. The censorship scam worked with too many government agencies, a marriage to be sure, but one designed to silence Americans or anyone who challenges bogus claims. The mission was to study what it described as the abuse of the internet to cause harm and to create policies to mitigate and misinformation about the bogus matters that people were talking about. And in fact, their mission seemed to be in every way possible to cover up, hide, and obliterate any truth about damage caused to society. Now, the gigantic efforts of the government and its partners to censor every aspect of speech that contradicts the official state narrative, which is only meant to replace reality, is the work of totalitarian forces. And their terms show that the people are the enemy, and that arming the government against its own citizens is the answer to consolidating their power and control. These terms include disinformation, thought crime, thought police, information misuse, domestic activists and online actors, and many others. Remember what happened recently with a woman standing on a street corner in the UK, and the police came up to her and asked her if she was praying in her mind, and she said, "I may have been praying," and they arrested her. Thought police. So the obvious idea is to eliminate critical thinking, criticism, and dissent in favor of presenting only the state narrative. This is more dangerous than most of the population can fathom, as any topic that challenges the state and its actions is now considered taboo, and is therefore prohibited. And the elimination of all free speech is sought by the controlling element of society to eliminate the truth in favor of narratives, and this can only lead to complete enslavement of society. Censorship is always about hiding the truth, covering up corruption and criminal behavior, shifting thought and criticism, and it's a form of torture of the mind and cannot be allowed to remain in freedom, not be allowed to remain if freedom is to survive. John Stuart Mill said, "If all mankind but one were of the same opinion, mankind would no more be justified in silencing that one person than they would be justified if they had the power in silencing mankind." And this I've translated for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.